Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. After you hear our first story, you'll be happy for our OP who finally broke up with his wife. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Hey guys, want to meet my first wife? So I grew up on the West Coast, and that's where I met my first wife. To appease her and her family, we moved to the East Coast where she was from. Okay, fine. So once a year, we'd go visit my family on the West Coast as a vacation, and since we're broke AF, while I was putting myself through college at night while working full-time, my family would pay for half of our plane tickets. So one day, my wife starts a conversation with me as follows. Wife: Hey, how come we always go to your family for vacation? Me: Well, because they're far away. Once a year, I'd like to see them. W: But that's not fair to my family that we never spend a vacation with them. Me: Well, we spend Christmas, Easter, New Year's, birthdays, Thanksgiving, and all major holidays with them, and none of that with my family. W: I was talking with my mom, and she suggested that healthy couples spend vacations apart. Me: Oh, really? W: Yes. Me: Well, I didn't get married to have separate vacations from my wife. W: But what if I wanted to go on vacation with my mom? Me: Well, we're married. I can't force you to do anything, so if you want to have a vacation with your mom, I'm not going to stop you. Drum roll. W: Well, since I won't be coming with you and your parents always pay for half of the ticket, do you think they'll give me the money so I can use it for my vacation? Note, we got divorced a couple years after this. Dude, I don't know whether to congratulate you or give you my condolences. And our second story. Revenge on loud partying college students. This occurred in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was in grade school. I grew up on a street that was mostly old houses from the 1910s, and most of them were huge, like built originally as single-family homes, but massive enough to turn into apartments or studios, which is what a lot of landlords did, to make a decent profit off the kids who went to college about 6 blocks up the street. I think typically 6 to 8 kids shared one house. One such house was directly next door, and another was down and across the street. There was a lot of turnover in these houses, as you can imagine, and it always stressed my mom and dad out to see new kids moving in. As an adult, I now understand why. A few times we had some really chill, nice kids living next door, and a few times we had total a-holes living there. One year it was a-holes. They were hard party types who didn't care if it was the middle of the week or the middle of the night to throw an insanely loud, rowdy house party. And when I say loud, I mean that even inside, with our houses being separated by a large yard, we could still hear the bass thumping from inside our house, sometimes until 3 in the morning. Now, my dad's one of the most laid-back and passive people I know. He always started by going next door himself to ask them to kindly keep it down. This particular crowd basically blew him off, and if I recall, had a few colorful words for him. Okay, fine. Police were called. The policy at the time, IIRC, was if the police were called 3 separate times over the same house, a complaint was launched automatically. These kids didn't care. The complaint happened, and I assume the landlord gave them mild crap for it. They quieted down for maybe a week or 2, then started back up again. I don't know how they didn't get evicted, other than the landlord cared more about money than keeping the peace in the neighborhood. This went on all effing semester. And to add to it all, the partygoers would lob all their trash over the fence into our yard. This includes glass, which broke often. Once there were beer bottles right under where my swing set was. Needless to say, my parents were not happy. If either parent confronted these jerks, they would be rude and unpleasant. My mom began picking up their trash and throwing it back into their yard, for what good that did. The morning after one particularly loud party, I was out in the yard with my mom and our dogs. One of the dogs was a hound. This information will be relevant shortly. I think my mom was picking up some of the trash. It was mid-morning and the party people were next door sleeping off their hangovers. I had the idea of bringing one of my many pets out in its cage. Honestly, can't remember which one. I had a plethora of hamsters, guinea pigs, and rabbits growing up. I would sometimes take the bottom off the cages and let the critters enjoy the grass for a bit. I did this not thinking about our high prey drive hound being outside at the time. He got really worked up upon seeing a small animal and started baying loudly. Now I'm thinking, oh crap, the dog's making noise, gonna take the critter back inside. My mom glanced over, saw what was going on, and said something along the lines of, "Leave the critter out here for a bit." So I kept it out of reach of the hound, which had to be on a long rope as he'd bolt and run off, and just sat there for a minute watching him incessantly bay over and over, before it dawned on me what my mom was doing. Mind you, we were as close to this house as we could be without going over the fence. These hungover people were getting a rude awakening, plus this was one night we'd called the cops. They were going to have to deal with a complaint and their landlord when they got up. Mom continued throwing trash over the fence back into their yard. Dog bayed, critter didn't care. Critter was safe under his cage and happily snacking on the grass. I doubt any of the other neighbors would have cared, as we knew most of them and they'd all been dealing with the same noise we had for months. No one from the house ever came out, but I know that dog made enough racket to wake them all up, hopefully feeling like crap. That was the last rowdy party that house had until the end of the semester. I didn't find out about this next bit until I was well into adulthood. Part 2 of this revenge includes my dad, who to his credit always tried to deal with these people civilly. The victims of his revenge were in the house down the street. They were so loud that a half a block away we could still hear the music and yelling, except these people were meaner. They got really crazy, and sometimes the parties got violent. When my dad went to ask them to lower the noise level, they said not just nasty, but threatening things to him. Same complaints to the cops, same BS. After they kept us awake for the dozenth time, my dad went over to their absolutely trashed yard after dark. With him, he had a crock pot of chili that had been neglected in the fridge for far too long. My dad said it smelled and looked like vomit, and lo and behold, there was the motorcycle of one of the a-holes parked in the front yard uncovered. My dad liberated the rotten chili onto said bike. He told me he peeked out the window a few times and actually got to witness the glorious moment the bike owner came upon his defiled cycle. The guy apparently actually put his hand in the stuff. I'm sure he thought someone else had been sick on the bike. No one ever cleaned off the bike either. It sat in the yard until it was nothing but rust. I still consider my dad to be one of the most passive human beings on earth, but it shows that everyone has their limit. Fortunately, afterwards, both houses had decent kids every year until we moved away from that house. There are 3 things that all wise men fear: the sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man. Patrick Rothfuss. And our last story. You can sue me, I'm used to it. Okay. This happened a few years ago in 2016. At the time, I was working for Company X in a pretty new industry. Think less than 10 years, which means there wasn't a lot of rules and laws yet. I don't want to give too many details just in case. Most of the people working in that industry were passionate people willing to work for free. That's how I started initially as a writer for another company until Company X recruited me. See, because that industry was new and mostly consisted of passionate people, it was also mostly built by friends with barely any knowledge on how to run a business. It worked because people loved it, but had a lot of problems. Most of all, everything that had to deal with contracts, paying people, and anything HR. The little startup I was working for was no exception, and I got hired under a specific contract that was supposed to be used for people working for a short time period, not a long-term contract. I was okay with it at first. It was one of my first jobs, and I didn't know any better, but I soon realized it was a way of paying less company taxes, and that the CEO kept lying to us. We were all under the same contract, and promising we'd get a real contract next month. Every month. Then came the time when I stopped being paid, and that made me angry. I lived in an expensive city and was paid minimum wage on a crappy contract, so passion had its limits. I borrowed money from my boyfriend to make ends meet, and the CEO was using some of the company's money to pay for drinks too when he was out with his closest friends in the company. After 4 months of asking for my money and never seeing it coming, I went to the CEO and told him I'd sue if they didn't pay me by the end of the month. Also that I was quitting at the same time too. He replied, "Go ahead, sue me. I'm used to it and I'm not scared. You won't win." That got me angry. I resolved to sue. Little did he know everyone was fed up with the situation, and I knew nobody had ever sued him, so I knew what he said was a tactic to deter me. I did my homework, forwarded emails to myself proving that I was owed money, that my contract should be requalified as long-term because it was hidden work, and asked for a large sum as compensation. When they got served, they paid me the 4 missing months immediately, asking me to drop all other charges. I said, "F you." When they got served, they paid me the 4 missing months immediately, asking me to drop all other charges. I said, "F you." After just under 10 months, not that long when it's legal stuff with lawyers, etc., they folded. I got my lawyer's fees paid by them, as well as a substantial sum of money. I was able to pay my boyfriend back with a small bonus and put some money aside too. Most of all, it scared them so much they hired some real staff to do the accounting, changed their other employees' contracts to long-term to make sure they wouldn't sue either, and now I hear that people are paid on time, which is my greatest reward. Many employees actually thank me for suing them because of how it improved their own conditions. I now work in a different industry with a real contract, and I make 4 times what I used to make. So even though I'm pretty much banned from that industry, I'm totally fine with it and better off now. Don't tell me to sue you when you're wrong, because I will. What are you gonna do, sue me? Quote from man who lost lawsuit. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.